Hello dear students. Today we are going to discuss the topic Nature and Origin of Personal Laws in India, which is a part of module number 2 in Family Law 1. To start with the introduction, personal laws are a body of principles that is adapted to the beliefs, usages and customs of a particular group of people. Personal laws influenced by religion govern marriage, divorce, guardianship, adoption and succession in India's civil sphere. In India, there are separate legal systems for the country's many religious minorities. Personal laws have remained largely unchanged under all ruling governments, despite calls for a uniform civil code dating back to the drafting of the Constitution of India. The proposed changes have been criticized for interfering with the religious liberty guaranteed by the Constitution, as personal law reforms have thus far occurred within the scope of individual codes. The Indian legal system is distinguished by its personal law. India is a multi-ethnic country with distinct personal laws for various communities. Culture, behavior, beliefs and values are social constructions that shape people's views on their ancestors and origins, and these narratives are recorded in the personal laws. Students, these social norms are protected by law in India. Through invasions and migrations over the centuries, people of many faiths, including Christians, Parsis and Muslims, have made India their home. Due to invasions and migration, personal law in India is quite varied. Individuals in the same country may be subject to different set of laws based on their ethnicity or religion under personal law systems. In spite of India's adoption of a constitution after independence, the personal law system has persisted. Now we will discuss personal law through the ages. Students, Shruti and Smriti were the primary sources for codifying life's practices in ancient India. Because of the close relationship between religion and law, Rig Veda, Sam Veda, Yajur Veda and Atharva Veda were all part of the Shruti collection. Hindu religious sages passed on their wisdom in the form of transmissions known as the Smritis. The non-recognition of difference between social law, civil law and religious law was a major flaw in this system. Manusmriti, one of the later Smriti classified treatises, dedicated 12 chapters to each of these laws and made clear distinctions between them. There are 8 chapters on civil and criminal law, then another 8 on religion and ethics. The personal laws, which were not subject to monarchy, were established by the ancient texts and sages. Yajnavalakya and Narada were 2 of other Smritis. In ancient India, the government could not remain neutral or interfere with religious affairs. People in Hindu India had complete freedom to make their own laws. Personal law was governed by Hindu sages who looked to the Vedas and other religious texts for guidance. The Hindu sages based their ethical guidelines on scripture. These guidelines were used for all aspects of Hindu society, from religious rituals and social interactions to public policy and government administration. Neither civil law, nor religious law, nor social law were treated differently. The concept of dharma served as cornerstone of society at the time. The line between secular law and religious dogma was indistinct. At first, the society functioned as a unit of organization, but by the time Hindu India ended, especially during the Smriti period, the state had already begun to take the shape. The king personally oversaw this group of saptangs. The sages had formulated and articulated rule of law, and the king and his subjects had to abide by it. The king's power to legislate was limited, and he was obligated to run the country in accordance with Dharma principles. At his coronation, the king took an oath to uphold the law and not to make the changes based on his whims. As a result, it was abundantly clear that Dharma served as Hindu India's guiding principle. The Dharmashastras and ancient traditions were the basis of king's administration of justice. On the other hand, religious texts known as Shastras included a number of rules outlining what people should and should not do. However, it is explicitly stated in the Shastras that customs must be followed when they replace or supplement religious texts. Hindu law was unique in that it was thought to have a common origin with Hinduism and thus governed the entire Hindu community. Therefore, the uniformity of law was the rule rather than the exception, even though the small Hindu communities occasionally had minor disagreements over the matters of personal law. Therefore, it can be concluded that personal law existed in ancient India. Thus, the Hindus saw the laws as essential to their faith. Students, next we will discuss laws under Islamic rule. The Islamic era of Indian law began with the arrival of Muslims. At the turn of 11th and 12th centuries, the Hindu era began to fall on hard times. The once powerful Hindu empire began to fall apart. Political history of the time period is defined by recurrent power struggles among a small number of states. There was also a lack of competent leadership among the Indians, which hindered their ability to coordinate their political and military efforts against a common foe. Students, in many religions, Muslim rulers did not even bother to enforce Islamic private law for Muslims, much less for non-Muslims. The British in India saw many Muslim communities continuing to follow their traditional practices and customs, but they did nothing to stop it. Therefore, during the Muslim era, all non-Muslims were subject to personal laws established by their own religious and traditional systems. When Muslims took control of India, their legal code was able to be enforced by the government for the first time. The Muslim rulers of India faced the challenge of figuring out that how to control the country's massive Hindu and Sikh populations. Because they were not Hindu, the country's rulers did not adopt Hindu law and did not completely replace it with their own. The civil aspects of Hindu law were not changed by the Mohammedan rulers as well. As a result, Muslims continued to follow Sharia while Hindus were allowed to keep their own legal system. This only applied to the law governing private matters. During Muslim rule, the following provisions of both Islamic and secular law were enforced. In the sphere of civil law, inheritance, succession, marital rights, guardianship, bequest, etc. were all subject to the strict personal law of Islam, but only among Muslims. The commercial and contractual provisions of civil law were now binding on Muslims and non-Muslims alike. The Muslim rulers of India modified the existing system of taxation, including those pertaining to land revenue, minerals, quarries, manufacturing, agriculture, excise, merchandise, seaborne trade, etc. The Muslims were not exempted from paying these impute duties and taxes. Students, personal law cases involving Hindus were previously decided with the aid of learned Hindu Pandits, and in the case of other races, their learned men who were well versed in their respective religious and personal laws. Secondly, in the term of criminal law, only Muslims were subject to the provisions of the Islamic canon law that dealt with religious transgressions like drinking, marriage within a prohibited degree, apostasy, etc. Sharia law exempted non-Muslims from criminal liability for these offences. In addition to Farmans and Dastarul Amal, the edicts and ordinances were enacted to serve as guidelines for state officials. Students, in contrast to the canon law, they reflected the common law of the country. Courts of common law were set up in India according to these Qanoons, which were binding on the judicial and executive officers. In Islamic law, there was a clear separation between public law and private law. Marriage, family law, successions, etc. were classified as private law, while criminal law and public administration were placed in the first category. In matters of private law, non-Muslims were not required to adhere to Islamic law and were instead free to follow their own religious traditions. Students, now we will discuss the evolution of laws under British rule. The British introduced a highly developed and organized legal system into India, replacing Mughal and regional judicial systems with British established courts. The legal system was based on Islamic tradition with civil law, criminal law, commercial law and procedural law all derived from religious principles. The Indian Evidence Act and the Civil Procedure Code were created to address the issues of religious practices in India. The British initially refused to interfere with the religious practices, but the codification of a common criminal procedure without also codifying civil laws left a false division that could destabilize the country. The British found the process to be overly complicated and outdated, leading to the passage of the Secular and Religion-Free Penal Code and the Criminal Procedure Code. This legislative process resulted in the nullification of all sacramental and religious statutes and the establishment of new ones in these areas. Originally, the British Charter of 1753 allowed Hindus and Muslims to practice their own religious laws without interference from the British government, unless both the sides voluntarily submitted to the court's jurisdiction. The British would not intervene. It was officially declared by Governor General of India, Warren Hastings, in 1772 that Muslims would be governed by the Quran and Hindus by the Shastras. This was reaffirmed in the Cornwallis Code of 1793. Both the 1797 Government of India Act and 1915 Government of India Act contained the same provisions. The Hastings Plan, which handed over the administration of justice to English judges, sparked the emergence of personal law in India. It was also noticed that judges increasingly used the subjective terms justice, equity and good conscience in their rulings. The Act of Settlement of 1781 restored the powers and jurisdiction of Calcutta Supreme Court and recognized the Hindu and Mohammedan legal systems, while the Judicial Charter of 1753 prohibited the jurisdiction of the mayor's courts, which were the courts of English law, to hear cases between Indians unless requested by the parties. With the passage of British High Courts Act in 1861, the Supreme Courts in Calcutta, Madras and Bombay were abolished. When reviewing lower courts' decisions, the High Courts Act requires it to apply Hindu and Muslim law and customs as the lower courts should have. Thus, it was clear that the British allowed the natives to establish their own personal laws and did not interfere with the religious matters. Furthermore, as was previously mentioned, the British safeguarded the Indian religious statutes. In 1834, the Lord Macaulay was appointed as the Law Commission's first chairman. Between the years of 1862 and 1872, India experienced a period of significant social reform as a result of widespread calls for change. The Indian Divorce Act of 1869, the Hindu Wills Act of 1870, the Special Marriage Act of 1872, the Indian Evidence Act of 1872 and the Christian Marriage Act of 1872 were revised by the Child Marriage Restraint Amendment Act of 1978. Legal reforms that took place around this time included the Divorces Registration Act of 1876, the Indian Majority Act of 1875 and Married Women's Property Act of 1874. As the Second Law Commission was appointed in 1850, subsequent legislations included the Caste Disabilities Removal Act, the Indian Penal Code, the Indian Evidence Act, the Indian Contract Act, the Transfer of Property Act of 1882, the Child Marriage Restraint Act of 1929, which was later repealed by the Prohibition of Child Marriages Act of 2006, the Indian Succession Act of 1865, which was amended in 1925, the Special Marriage Act of 1872, which was re-enacted after the independence in 1954, and numerous other legislations. British India's Fourth Law Commission was established on February 11, 1879 to compile and standardize the country's substantive laws. All Indian citizens, regardless of their religious affiliation, are bound by Indian Penal Code of 1860 and the Criminal Procedure Code of 1898, now 1973. Credit goes to the work of various law commissions, but there was no unified legal code in place. Muslim personal law was updated in 1876 as a result of Awadh Laws Act. A number of landmark statutes such as the Transfer of Property Act, the Guardians and Wards Act, and the Bengal Protection of Mohammedans Pilgrim Act 1896 followed. In 1866, the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, the highest court of appeal in British Empire, made Sharia law supreme over local customary law, making the first step in this direction. In cases where local customary law is recognized, the proof of special usage is required. Eventually, the High Courts in Calcutta 1882 and the Allahabad 1900 made it illegal for Muslims to rely on their own interpretations of the law. The Judicial Committee of the Privy Council changed its mind in 1913, deciding that customary laws had an important place in the Muslim society and could be used in British Raj courts. There were 4 major pieces of legislation passed that directly affected Muslim law: the Musalman Validating Act of 1913, the Muslim Personal Law Shariat Application Act of 1937, the Insurance Act of 1938 and Muslim Marriage Dissolution Act of 1939. Muslims in India have historically adhered to convoluted mix of traditional Indian practices and Sharia law. To be clear, Muslims have been expected to follow Muslim personal law ever since the Shariat Act was passed in 1937. The Shariat Act, enacted by Muslim League to codify Muslim laws, has been the foundation of Muslim personal law in India. However, the Act also made accommodations for women, such as excluding agricultural land to prevent the inheritance of property. In 1939, the Dissolution of Muslim Marriages Act was passed, legalizing the divorce for Muslim women, but not for Hindu women for another 2 decades. The British government avoided interfering with Indian religion, avoiding comprehensive Hindu or Muslim legal codes. The British government passed the law relating to regulate contracts and commercial activities and the transfer of immovable property, governing the succession of lands, rents, goods and contract and dealing with parties. In contrast to Muslim law, which sought to restore some traditional customs and preserve the status quo, the Hindu law placed a much greater emphasis on reforms. Abolition of sati by Lord William Bentinck and passage of Hindu Widow Remarriage Act by Lord Dalhousie in 1856 were 2 of the most important social reforms enacted by the British. The Indian Majority Act of 1875, which set the age of majority at 18, and the Hindu Wills Act of 1870, which gave Hindus the power of testamentary disposition for the first time, are also important pieces of legislation. Laws such as 1929 Child Marriage Act and Hindu Women's Property Rights Act of 1937 are two examples. Arya Samaj Act of 1948, Hindu Inheritance Removal of Disabilities Act of 1928, Anand Marriage Act of 1909, Hindu Disposition of Property Act of 1916, Hindu Gains of Learning Act of 1930, Hindu Women's Right to Property Act of 1937, and the Sati Prevention Act of 1829 are the few examples. Now students, we will discuss the efforts for Uniform Civil Code. Students, now we will discuss the efforts for Uniform Civil Code. Only after the Parliament passed the Hindu Code Bills in the 1950s, which disregarded customary laws and addressed many of the prevalent gender inequalities in Hinduism, did Hindu law undergo significant reform. After India gained its independence, its leaders paid scant attention to issues of family law. The political leaders of the time were able to protect the British colonies' judicial system. The Constituent Assembly of India faced a dilemma in the late 1940s when deciding whether to include the personal matters of each religious group in the realm of lawmaking when drafting the Constitution. There were many in the Constituent Assembly who felt strongly that the national unity and cohesion could not be achieved without a standardized civil code. Personal law reform and a standardized civil code were seen by most as responsibilities best left to the legislature. There were many Muslims who voted against adopting the Uniform Civil Code. In the draft of Article 35, now Article 44, one Muslim delegate argued that the state does not have the authority to legislate on personal laws, and the phrase civil code does not refer to a citizen's strictly personal law. Members who identified as Muslims argued that India as a secular state should not legislate regarding the beliefs and practices of religious groups. Members who advocated for a unified civil code, on the other hand, rejected the claim that doing so would infringe on their right to religious freedom. Dr. Ambedkar made an effort to appease Muslim concerns by defending his stance on the optional nature of the Uniform Civil Code. Article 35, now Article 44, was added to the Constitution in place of the proposed amendment by the Muslim members. After much back and forth, the proposed Article 35 was ratified without an amendment and renumbered as Article 44 of the Constitution. Students, in the conclusion, I would like to append that the Hindu legal system has a rich history, dating back to early Hindu era when religion and legal systems became intertwined. The Dharma Sutras, representatives of the earliest Smriti period, suggest that no distinction was made between civil law, religious law and social law. However, personal law differentiation reached its pinnacle during the Muslim era when foreign invaders toppled native Hindu kings, causing chaos in Hindu society and allowing invaders to impose their own religious personal laws. The British monarchy, adhering closely to the Islamic system of judicial administration, sought to standardize the various legal systems without offending people of different faiths. The British government appointed multiple law commissions to create laws that could be applied uniformly regardless of a person's religious beliefs. They aimed to restrict the enforcement of Hindu and Muslim legal codes in areas where they did not threaten national security. The British government also attempted to pass new legislation to propel social change and regulate behavior, covering all aspects of life from starting a family to ending one. The idea of a standardized civil code was given a boost by the Constituent Assembly, which included a uniform civil code as one of the directive principles of state policy due to the Assembly's majority support for the concept of law uniformity despite significant opposition. Dear students, I would like to end today's lecture with the quote from Swami Vivekananda, "Moral values and a culture and a religion. Maintaining these values are far better than laws and regulations." Thank you. Have a nice day.